I'd like to introduce Ara Sarafian.
If I said I would introduce myself, can you all hear me? Yeah. I'm a British Armenian. I was born in Cyprus. I was raised in the United Kingdom. My interest in Armenian affairs was purely accidental. I grew up in the 1970s and early 80s, teenager, when the Armenian question was in headlines almost every day because of Armenian terrorists, as they would say, assassinating Turkish diplomats. But more interesting, the response from the Turkish state saying these are common murderers, the issues that they are relating their actions to so-called Armenian genocide never happened, they're just terrorists. This is a place I did go when I was 18 years old, except in the backyard is Ottoman. This is the monastery of Grigor Naregatsi, one of the greatest Armenian writers ever, the Armenian mystic of medieval times. This is where he was buried. So his shirim was in there as a huge monastic complex, which was there in one form or the other until 1950s. All right? Before I went there, by the time I went there, there's no monastery, there's no monastic presence. There's actually a mosque in its stead. The village name has been changed. So this is a process through which the Turkish state has denied the Armenian genocide. And I was a victim of that the first time I went there. I actually had no idea what was there. To me, that would have been a Turkish, or in this case, a Kurdish village. And so starting from there, I became a historian because I wanted to know how can we reverse this process? How can we bring memory back into onto the landscape? And one issue that I wanted just to show you in terms of empowerment concerns the question of demography, something that Levon has also worked on. One of the core themes in Turkish historiography is that, well, there weren't that many Armenians there anyway. Armenians were an insignificant minority. And in fact, in a clever twist, what they do today is, instead of denying everything, they've reverted to tokenism. All right, so you renovate the one Armenian church in Ahtamar, which is still standing, but PR piece for Turkey, yet there are 25 other churches around that have simply disappeared. Because Istanbul, Constantinople was a center, Armenians in a sense discovered the eastern provinces in a proper way in the 1870s. The first reports of Kharpert and Erzurum and Van area, entire list of where are the Armenian villages, what are their conditions, what is population, education, wealth. Already the Armenians began to generate this type of information. And throughout the Ottoman period, including Hamidian period, because Armenians were literate and because they had a sense of who they are and had a sense of advancement, they were gathering and publishing information. By the turn of the century, after especially the 19th revolution, you had entire studies done by Adolf, for example, who was a Russian Armenian who visited this area, Van Bitlis and Erzurum. He published a 400-page manuscript on it. There's a gentleman by Kasabian in 1913. He wrote a book, Armenians in Nicomedia. I mean, so when we talk of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, it's not simply historic Armenia, as we say. There are Armenians populations in other parts of the Ottoman Empire. And from a critical perspective, Dr. Karayan listed over 4,000 Armenian inhabited villages in the late Ottoman period by name. The old name, the new name, geographic coordinates, and population based entirely on Armenian sources. And according to Dr. Karayan, the Armenian population of the Ottoman Empire was above 2.5 million. It's not a figure that I would have given, but he's made this into a thesis. He's presented a whole discussion that allows now, especially in the Anglo-Saxon world, in the English-speaking world, scholars to take note of. Right? Before this, by the 1970s and 80s, there were the Turkish proxies, as I might call them, had a disproportionate voice in this country. People like Stanford Shaw and Justin McCarthy, Kemal Karpat, they utilized Ottoman sources to argue that there were only 1.25 million there. That had some impact in the English-speaking world. They published their articles in the IJMES, International Journal of Middle East Studies. The Armenian response has come late, but it has come in a much more forceful way. And Dr. Karayan's work is now one of those mileposts. Sir?
What figure would you put it at? You said you wouldn't put it at 2.5.
I'm not the right person to ask because I didn't do the work that Karayan did, but I went by 2 million, 2.1 million. I don't know what Levon would have said. I mean, these figures are still over 2 million. In comparison, I compared the actual survey itself to the book in Karayan, and that was one way that I could validate his work. This also gives you an idea of how sophisticated Armenians were in the Ottoman Empire. So it's a printed form, Vijay blank Temin, in this says Harper, 1913. Here you have a column, several pages long, over 40 of them, the name of one of the villages, then you have the population of Armenian Apostolic, Armenian Protestant, Armenian Catholic, total Armenian households, Kurdish population, Turkish population, other Christians, other Muslims, nomads. Here you have Bantuks, very important, Armenians who were away from their villages and where they had gone to. And if you look at this Kharpet area, as a huge number of people are away from the plain. Where are they? United States. So this you can actually identify even from that point. They were emigrating, they were going to the United States. We have these numbers, we have Islamized Armenians, schools, school children. It's very empowering. It means that we have the capacity to write our own histories with force, because the Turkish authorities have not managed to destroy all of our archival legacy. A lot of it is available. Another key category, this is Yerzunga. Armenian Patriotic Studies, about 80,000 pages of them. Armenians committed the memory of their lost homelands, the survivors, into print. And this is the cartographic example. When I show this to Turkish colleagues, they're absolutely amazed because they don't have such maps from the Ottoman era for their own references. In fact, I was going to say how many of you are Armenian. If I have a talk like this in England now, I will say out of 30, 40 people, there'll be 5 of them will be Turkish because they're interested in these sources. Armenian sources inform Turks about the history and especially the social history of their own land, Turks and Kurds. So again, this is just to give you flavor of the sort of material that you've got there. And if ever you guys got a history or show interest, that it's a lot of interesting material to work with. So what can we do? Back to Kharpet. So when we talk about the Armenian genocide, not only can we actually give details of general demographic details, but we can represent it on a map. So this is a Kharpet plain to get today. These are the areas that have been dammed over, they're underwater. We can actually show every single Armenian village according to the data that we have. The population breakdown, the red is actually Apostolic Armenians, the green is Protestants, the gray ones are Turkish. So we can represent ourselves, and when we say, when we talk about the Armenian genocide, we are talking about the destruction of every single one of these communities one by one by one. A whole spectrum of Turks who are open to be swayed, whole spectrum of Kurds who are open to be swayed. And Hrant Dink's impact was immediate. He was on television, and then because of his success, of course, he was killed in what, 2007. Again, at his funeral, unbeknown to the authorities, we had over 100,000 Turks that turned up at his funeral shouting, "We are all Armenian, we are all Hrant Dink." And that was a real milestone in modern Turkish history, because having taken the lid off the Armenian question, they realized that the Turkish state has not, its monopoly in a sense has failed. And ever since that time, I've also started to get involved inside of Turkey, where we've taken exhibitions, we've organized conferences. We had Adana 100th anniversary was organized in Istanbul with Turkish universities. And already we and others have been networking within Turkey itself. This map, from similar as the map before, is for the area of Bitlis. Bitlis, it's in 1913. This map was used for an exhibition that we organized in Bitlis, which is Lake Van. All right, the Van is here, Bitlis is here, Paris. We organized an exhibition called Armenians 100 years ago. It was a bizarre experience because it was entirely through social media. I wrote on social media saying, I want to come to Bitlis because I want to build bridges that were destroyed 100 years ago. All right, immediate response from there. So I went out there cold. I had a meeting with 20 people, of course, all guys. But we said, all right, let's have an exhibition. We had this exhibition with amazing photographs. The photographs came from Mount Holyoke College in the United States because the Americans had a school in Bitlis. We had this amazing exhibition, and we had hundreds of youngsters turn up. And they were absolutely amazed because, you know, they come, for argument's sake, somebody comes from this village and they know about the Armenians here, but they don't know about the Armenians elsewhere. And they start having debates among themselves, and they themselves changed. They realized that actually Armenians were such a major presence, and the whole atmosphere changed. And Bitlis became one of our strong place of activity. A month later, there were elections. The elections were won by this HDP, this progressive Kurdish party. And then the mayors were empowered, and then we started discussing what should we do next, right? So one of the things they did was they renamed one of the streets William Saroyan Street. We started talking in terms of how do you bring the memory of Armenians back into Turkey itself. And you have a sense of empowerment that in Turkey, especially in the southeast, the Kurdish areas, in fact, I'd say in Kurdish areas, nobody denies the Armenian genocide. The Kurds as a victim group themselves say out and out, we are responsible for the Armenian genocide. We were used by the Turkish state. Before we ask for our own rights vis-a-vis Ankara, we need to acknowledge what we've done to Armenians. And this is not something easy for them to say. This is the Turkish leadership, Kurdish leadership in places like Diyarbakir, the mayors, the members of parliament. This is a standard line. And once you start talking in this way, it's a major break from a Turkish state tradition. So the Kurds, southeastern Turkey, including Bitlis, it's possible to talk about, well, what do you do in the post-genocide? Yes, genocide is a given. We need to find a way of dealing with it. So what's the next stage? So in this case, it was an exhibition. In 2015, we had a conference in Bitlis on the Armenian genocide. Ismail Beshikci was there. Ismail Beshikci of Kayseri, for argument's sake, 48,000. Column 2, the number of Armenians who are in Kayseri in 1917, right, local. Something like 4,000, even though these are the simulator Armenians, 4,000. The third one, the number of Armenians who are counted in other provinces, for argument's sake, 5,000. That means that you start with 48,000. I'm not sure the exact figure, but they're pretty accurate. 48,000 in 1917. Because of his survey, you can count 9,000 Armenians from Kayseri in Kayseri or the other provinces. What does that tell you? It tells you that there's almost 40,000 Armenians missing in the empire. Yeah. And according to this data, out of 1.65 million, because that's what the figure he gives, out of 1.65 million Armenians, you have 1.2 million Armenians unaccounted for. It is absolutely phenomenal, and the ones who are unaccounted for are not only from the eastern provinces where they could have fled to Russia, but there are places like Izmir, Bardizak, which you have about 85% of them missing. Those people were deported. They could not have escaped anywhere. And by 1917, there's no trace of them. So Talat Pasha orders this report. It's a handwritten report. It stays with him. And I'm thinking, my goodness, and we can verify the data. What's interesting is that when I went to the archives to find the results of this survey, Derzor isn't there. Why is that? Because in the book itself, it says, number of Armenians in Derzor, 1917, 2,500. And then there's a footnote. It says, this number should be 6,500. So they've actually verified that at 6,500. Yes, but according to Turkish official thesis, there should be 400,000 Armenians there.
Servo, gdje padno vidjela, lavi od Hibreva.